This is my video on how to etch PCBs. Just to get things out of the way, I'm ugly, I've got a funny voice, a big nose, my room is messy. Yes. Basically what you do, once you've found the design you want, I can't remember to use this for anything. You put it onto a document or something that you want to use, Word or Paint or something, but make sure that you print it out first and test it to make sure that the holes line up with a PCB socket or something like that, because there's nothing worse than finishing a PCB and then having it drilling it and everything and then having the sockets and everything not fit. So once you've done that, you need to print it out onto a piece of glossy magazine paper. This is from Men's Health or Men's Fitness or something, not a picture of me, as you can see. So this is what the design looks like on the paper. It's quite difficult to see where it is, but generally I would cut this out now so I can line it up. So I'll do that now, I'll be back in a sec. Okay, there it is, cut out pretty much to the edges of the design. I'm a little bit kiffed with scissors, so that edge is not so good, but it's not that important there. Just make sure that the actual design itself is contained within the piece of paper. What I haven't done yet, which I should have done, is, remember where I put this, here it is, the copper clad board. As you can see, I've been trimming it down to size, and in the process I've got some greasy fingerprints on there. That will be a big problem when it comes to etching if they're not cleaned off, because the grease can stop the toner sticking properly to the copper clad board. I'll give it a rinse in here. This is my disgusting tub of ferric chloride, which is warming up now in the sink. I can do this in the sink because my wife is currently on holiday. So we'll give that a rinse and I'll be back shortly. Okay, here's now the PCB after it's been cleaned. You can probably see that it looks quite scratched as well. This is because I use a metal scourer for brushing the board off. There's a slight amount of oxidisation on top of the copper before you start, so it's a nice idea to clean that off, and it gives the toner a little bit of a surface to adhere to. I got my iron. It's a steam iron, not necessary, but it's the one that no longer was any good for ironing the clothes because I'd used it on PCBs so much. This board I've decided to etch is larger than the surface of the iron, so what I have to do is put it on there and hopefully it stays in one place, which it never does. So you see it's covering most of the surface of the board. Then just before I put the thing down, I'm just going to have to move it around a little bit to get the rest. It's very important that this is hot, and then the toner pretty much sticks immediately to the copper clad board. In the meantime, this is the ferric chloride that I use. It comes in granule form, little packets like this, with German written all over it. I'm not a particularly good reader of German, but it will give you a certain literage there. Oh crumbs, I can't focus. But it's basically one of these packets does roughly half to 1 litre of solution. It's best when you first get it because it's not got any copper in there existing. This is quite brown now and has been probably fairly close to being saturated and useless, at which point it will have to be disposed of. That's what it looks like. It stinks to high heaven. It's a disgusting smell. Not something you want up your nose, and not something you want any metal objects near, because it is rather good at oxidising things. Okay, so I'm going to let this PCB warm up and I'll be back shortly. Okay, the board is pretty hot now. I can't touch it because it hurts. I did try, which is obviously a brilliant idea. You see it does have a little few scuffs on it. They don't normally matter but we'll find out when the etching process is complete. Unfortunately, I'm using an iPhone to film this, so I'm going to have to sort of try and prop it up somewhere. Didn't really think this through very well. Right. So now what I'm going to do is take the design that I've etched off here and try and line it up on this piece of copper clad board. I did cut the board quite generously. Ow, it is hot. So I'll leave that there. I'm going to chuck the iron back on top of it as well for a minute. Just like that. This is why you use an iron that is not going to be used again for clothing, because you tend to get quite a lot of print on the bottom of the iron. While that's warming up, just get a piece of paper, whatever you want, a bit of recycled paper, something you've already tried to print some designs on. The reason for this is that the iron tends to stick when you're trying to apply pressure and push it over the design on the board. So what I do now is get pretty much as hard as I can press on the board. This is great because it's sliding all over the place. And then just go over it like this, over the entire design. It can be good just to check that you've got no edges peeling up on the inside as well. You see they're fairly tight down there now, which means that the toner is starting to take and to hold the piece of glossy magazine down onto the copper clad board, which is a good sign. It's a good idea to be very thorough with this section, because if you screw this up, then you've got to start again. Basically, you've got to get some acetone, clear the whole board off, re-scrub it, reheat it, and it's just a big pain in the backside to have to do the whole lot again. So I'm going to do this for another couple of minutes, and I'll do the next step then. Hey, this poor guy's about to be ripped to pieces, but I don't know how well this will show up on the camera. But you see the edges actually pretty tight to the board all the way around. So hopefully that will mean that it's going to take well. We're doing it now. Just get bit of water. I've only got one plug. Bugger it. Okay, I'll use use a bit of water here and let it soak. It has to soak for some time. I don't know how well it'll show up on the camera. You can see it's starting to discolour the paper already, and before long, like down there on the bits of white, you can see the design coming through. After a short amount of time now, maybe sort of 5 minutes or so, a little bit less, we'll be able to practically peel that off and then gently rub the rest of the paper off before we put it into the solution. So I'll come back when that is ready to rub off. Okay, so I just tested a little bit of the corner there, and it's pretty good. If you can see right in the corner, that was a full circle. It's now not a full circle because I scraped it with my fingernail. This is why you have to be very careful when you're rubbing this stuff off, because it is only resting on the surface and very gently glued on there. But you can see now how, because the paper is quite wet, it is fairly easy to pull the paper off the design there. There are a few little gaps at the edges. This is quite common actually, because it's difficult to apply the heat around the edges quite so much as you can in the middle of the design. This is actually coming off really well so far. You can, if you do have gaps and bits missing in the design, you can use a Sharpie or a Staedtler permanent marker. Any waterproof permanent marker should do it. and just fill in the blanks. It's not very neat, but it does save re-etching the board or printing and ironing and all that crap. So I'll just continue to pull this off. That sounds dodgy. And I'll come back when it's finished. Okay, it's pretty much done. There's still a few things left to do before we pop it in. If you just have a look, you can see that some of these focus man. Little bits still left on there, little bits of white. It won't hamper the etching really, but you may find that you get a bit too much copper on the board because it's just sort of bridging or exceeding the gap there, so that can happen. Another thing to look out for, you can see a few of these traces very close to breaking, so I'll fill them in with a pen. Just basically just fill in the blanks. That's all you have to do, but don't be too generous with the pen. The main problem with using the pen is that it does tend to rinse a little bit off in the solution. Things like this can happen, and you can give them a little scrape just before it goes in or afterwards, just to make sure that you haven't got a short circuit between those two. The same applies somewhere up there. Can't remember what it was, but it's similar there. The other thing that happens quite a lot when you're doing this is here, and you see the hole by there is filled in. It's not that important, but it is very annoying when you come to drill it and you can't see the flipping holes, so it does tend to make the drill wander around a little bit afterwards. So when all that's done, I'll just continue to do this. I'm doing all this with my finger and keep it wet just to make sure that it doesn't stick to the surface too much. And that's pretty much it on that bit. So I'll get my sugar. My little towel here and just give that a dry off. Again, make sure not to rub too hard that the thing comes away. But at this point you've pretty much done everything that's important. I did try once using the abrasive side of the sponge to do this and wipe the entire design off the board, so I wouldn't recommend trying to do that at any point. Obviously before you draw the new traces on, or the bits that are missing, it's important that the board is dry, because if it's not dry then the permanent marker's not going to stick to it. I've just got a tiny Sharpie here. It's probably a little bit fat for what I need it for, but if I should just show in the corner there, you can just sort of fit the design fairly roughly. And then completely lose sight of where I've done all the other ones. So there's one there, just to fill the trace in a little bit. Because of the nature of ferric chloride, it does saturate over time, and this happens because obviously all this copper here is going to be oxidized and mixed in with the solution. The same with all this copper here. I do like to try and cut off as much as I can. Can't be bothered to do that, you can colour it in or whatever you want to do. I do find if you've got a lot of it on there, you can actually just cover the board in insulating tape and get away with it that way. So I'm just going to pop this into the solution now and literally just do that. That's it, it's in there now. I'll leave it there for a couple of minutes to let the board warm up a bit more, and then after that it's a bit pikey, as we say, but just to use a flipping got any bit of plastic cutlery, I like to use a fork, but I haven't got any left because I've used them all for circuit boards. So basically you just get the thing underneath it, and then I just give it a wave like this. The reason for this is that if you leave the board in there, it will take a long time to do anything, because the solution just sits on top of the board and the bits that are oxidized just stay still, and you don't wash it off and you don't give the solution a chance to re-oxidize or to oxidize further down the layers. So by doing this, you're washing the old off and letting the new stuff start attacking the copper. So that's it. You just do this now until the board is starting to show signs of being clear of the copper. So I'll come back in a bit when that's done. Okay, just show quickly. This solution is pretty much shot, so it's taking forever to do this. This is after about 10 minutes of fanning about and pushing that stuff in and out. But you can just see on the corner there that the copper is beginning to go, possibly a little bit more obvious down that side. It will happen like this. It tend to do it from the edges in. I don't really know why that is. It's possibly because there's a clean edge, and I've considered in the past but never tried just scoring down the middle and seeing if it would go from the middle as well. It doesn't affect it too much. And like if you leave the board in the solution for too long, it will etch underneath the toner as well, and you will have a nice clean board of uncopper clad. So that's something to look out for. But that's what it starts looking like, and in another 5 or so minutes of messing about, pretty much all of that copper will be gone. So I'll come back then. Okay, I decided to film this bit now because you can see it's actually progressed quite a lot in a fairly short space of time. So let's keep agitating this for a while. And you can see at the back there of the circuit that it's actually washing off pretty quick now. Right before your eyes. Once it starts going around the edges, the actual the rest of the job doesn't normally take too long. You can notice that this section of board here is actually a lot less done than that side over there. I don't know why that is. Quite often get the one section takes a bit longer, but it doesn't take too much longer that it's going to be a threat to etching underneath the toner at any point on the board. That side now is pretty much almost entirely done. It can be tempting to pick this up and wash it around with your hands. It's not a good idea. As you can see, this stuff is very yellow, and that's what colour your hands will be for some time afterwards. So that's why I'm using a plastic fork. Nice. See now that one there is caught up pretty well, and they're pretty much almost all done. It's quite important to make sure that you haven't left any bits of road copper around, because it's be difficult to take them off afterwards with a craft knife or something, if they're causing shorts or connections between pins and stuff that you don't want. There's that crap that I didn't clean off on there. There will be copper underneath that, so that will have to be scraped off, or probably I'll just use a milling bit on the Dremel and just mill the PCB away underneath it. There's a bit left in the dead centre now, I'll just rinse that off. fact, I've changed the water in the sink in the meantime of this to keep it warm. To try and keep the solution a bit warmer as well, so it acts a bit quicker. Can be tempting to just put it out a little bit soon, but that's not advisable because, like I said, you can be left with tiny traces of copper. So that's it, the board is done, and as my wife isn't here, I'm just going to drop that in the sink there next to it. Just give it a quick rinse off. That's it. So take the solution out as well. I'll probably get yellow fingers for this. Talking about it. Not really, they're pretty good. You see the water's changed colour as well. It's a good idea to wash that out of the sink or whatever you're using, especially if it's metal. It does have, as I said, a tendency to etch everything. Right, I'll be back in a minute with the next step. Okay, the final bit. And this is the board as it is now. Quite nice. Still bits of paper left on it, but they'll come off now with this next step. I've got acetone, pure acetone here. It's not very expensive. It smells delicious, but it's probably not good if you drink it. I've got a little bit left because my wife seems to think that it's also used for taking her nail varnish off, which I'm not particularly pleased with, but you can't stop them once they've started. Right, so I've got just some blue paper towel as well. I'm going to put that down a moment. Look at my dirty ceiling. So just put a small amount of that onto the towel, and then give the board a rub. You can see the toner comes off. And you're left with just the copper trace underneath and the dirty top. Oops. Yep, I'll be in trouble for that. The acetone slightly melts melamine as well, just while you're at it. I'll do this over here instead. What I've never managed to quite do properly is stop it staining the board, which it does a little bit. It's not that important for me. If you get a board that's completely clear, then you're going to have to probably just bathe the board in acetone and let it wash itself off without rubbing it. But basically that's it. That's the whole process. So once you've done all that, then just drill all the holes, which is a gloriously laborious task, and then fill it. So I hope that's been some sort of help. If you've got any questions, let me know, or post on the electromusic.com forums. Thank you.